Hey everybody, welcome back to the High Performance Zone. Today I have the human guinea pig, AJ Jacobs, and we dive into gratitude in a big way, which you all know is very important to me. But we also talk about a warm glow that comes across you when you feel good as you're doing good. We talk a lot about pivoting and perspective shifts. One thing that he mentioned to me is it's not about the glass half full or half empty. It's just about being in awe that there's water in the glass, period. And then I love this quote of his. It's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting. The biggest takeaway, though, and wait till the end of this, you got to get to the end of the podcast, is we learned that one of the most important things about being healthy is learning how to squat when you go to the bathroom. All right, that's a big glad to be here. Here we go. Hey, everybody, welcome back. And today I have someone I've been dying to talk to. I've been so excited about this because we have a lot in common. So first off, AJ, thanks 1,000, buddy.
Thank you with that. Maybe even more than 1,000. I'm glad to be here, as you say.
We are glad to be here. You know, that thanks 1,000. I don't think people know that that's the title of your book. Tell me more about that. What is thanks 1,000?
Yeah, I'm a writer, and this was a book I wrote, came out a couple years ago. And the idea was that I wanted to explore gratitude and just how important it is. And so I decided, what if I thanked everyone who had anything to do with my morning cup of coffee, even the smallest role? Right. And this, it turned out to be way more than I ever anticipated, because I thanked the barista, of course, and I went to South America and I thanked the coffee farmer. But you can't imagine how many people it takes to make a cup of coffee if you really think about it. So I had to thank the logo designer of the coffee shop. I thanked the guy who drove the truck with the coffee beans, and he couldn't have done his job without the road. So I had to thank the people who paved the road, and you know, it went on and on and on. So I ended up thanking over 1,000 people, and it was a ridiculous and absurd in some ways, but it was also wonderful, because it made me realize how much I take for granted, and how it doesn't take a village to make a cup of coffee. It takes the world.
Powerful statement. You know, I was just in Kilimanjaro. I just hiked it about a month ago. And afterwards we went to a coffee farm. Okay. And I had the same experience, not at the level you did, but when you actually go on the farms, you know, and you see the people who are growing the beets, sorting the beets. I mean, the little lady they had who was picking out which is the prime bead, which is the good bean, which is not. I mean, all the what went into just the growing. And this was an organic farm, right? So they were talking about how they did that. But give me some insight, because it's a great idea. It's one of those ideas that sounds great. Hey, I'll go thank everyone that helped me with my coffee. And then you realize, holy shit, there's a lot of people here. I mean, traveling to South America. So first off, what kind of coffee was it? I got to know, what is your favorite coffee?
It was Colombian coffee I live in New York City, and it's a coffee shop here on the Upper West Side.
What's their name? Let's give them some press.
Sure, give them one, Joe Coffee. Okay. Yeah, it really was eye-opening just how many people, like you saw, how many people, and it didn't have to be coffee. I could have done anything. I could have done a pair of socks. I could have done this pen. I could have done, you know, these headphones I'm using. Everything takes so many people. And what was powerful about it is that it helped to really combat the negative bias, which I feel is kind of built into human brains. Unfortunately, it had a good purpose evolutionarily. You know, you wanted to really notice the one saber-toothed tiger, but nowadays what it does is it makes us notice the 3 or 4 things that go wrong every day. And we take for granted, or we ignore the hundreds, thousands that go right. So this was an attempt to do that. And I'll tell you, you know, it was awkward at times, because I would try to visit the people or call them and thank them. And some thought, you know, they say, is this a scam, a pyramid scheme? Like, what are you trying to do? But most of them were very grateful. And I remember I called the woman who does pest control for the warehouse where the coffee beans are stored. And I said, I know this this sounds strange, but I just want to thank you for keeping the insects out of my coffee. And she said, well, that is strange, but thank you. No one ever thanks me.
Yeah.
She said it's like a reverse crank phone call. So,
Wait a minute, reverse crank phone call. I like that.
Yeah. Usually you call to torment people, but this time, trying to just spread some joy, and it really is. That made me feel good. So gratitude really is a two-way street, as you know.
Yeah, let's dive more into gratitude. I want to dive into that, but I also want to acknowledge what you said about the negative thoughts, how negative thoughts are really spring up faster than the positive thoughts, right? So let's go to that real quick, and then let's circle back to gratitude. Don't let me forget. We're diving into gratitude, but you've done some research on the negative thoughts, and you mentioned the saber-toothed tiger. So two things. One is, since negative thoughts appear quickly, and by the way, somebody told me this, and I don't know the stats, so I don't know if it's accurate, that it takes about 3 seconds for a negative thought to appear, but about 13 seconds for a positive thought. Now, I haven't really dove into that, but just a corollary that negatives happen quickly, right? We spot the negative, and then it sticks into our brain, and we get stuck in that negative do loop, right? So what have you learned about how do you get out of the negative into the gratitude?
Yeah, that is one of my obsessions, because it really is easy to fall into that negative loop. One strategy I have that I find very effective is to really notice when something goes right, and even say it out loud to myself. Like I'll give you an example. Like, if I'm at the drugstore and there are 5 lines, and I get in a line and it goes quickly, like normally I would forget that, but I say to myself, you know what? I make a point. I say, I just got in the line that went quickly, because next time that I'm in the line that goes the slowest, I can't then say to myself, oh, I have the worst luck, I'm always in the slowest line. No, sometimes I'm in fast, sometimes I'm in slow, but unless you notice it, you will forget that.
That's a great point, man. It's the little things, right? And I love that analogy of standing in line. Catch, I guess, it's a great business term too, right? Walk around back when we were all together, and catch people doing good stuff, right? And you can do that in Zoom meetings too and stuff, is acknowledge the good stuff. On the Blue Angels, we used to have a debrief after every time we went flying. And, its real purpose was to find out if there was, what was going well, but if there's anything we could do better, any mistakes, of course, and safety and better, just to get better. But what we realized is the real power of the debrief was acknowledging others, reinforcing the positive. And that's where this glad to be here really came to be, is it's not just about, oh, we need to fix it and do better. Yeah, of course, but it's an and, right? It's the yes and the glad to be here and the gratitude is the single most important thing that we found on the Blue Angels, which led to high performance. How have you seen gratitude lead to high performance in your studies?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, it's certainly, I feel that you are more productive, you're more creative when you have positive affect, and gratitude to me is one of the most powerful of the positive emotions. And sometimes I'll wake up with that default negative, cranky mood. And what I have to do to get into the high performance mode is I'll force myself for 10 minutes, maybe even longer, half an hour, to do something to express gratitude. Whether I email my mom every morning, like one thing that I'm grateful for.
Oh, you do?
Or whether, yeah, I love that. And she emails me back. But one of the big themes of all of my books is the idea of acting your way into a new way of thinking, how much your behavior affects your thoughts, which I know you've talked about on this podcast. So yeah, there's a great quote. It's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than it is to think your way into a new way of acting.
Oh, I like that.
So I try to pretend, I fake it till I feel it. I fake, the gratitude, and then eventually it starts to sink in. And then I am in a much better place to have some high performance, or at least try.
I love it. I love it. Make sure I got that quote right. You say it's better or easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting.
Exactly. And I didn't come up with it. I wish I did. Is the founder of Habitat for Humanity. Is,
oh, nice.
I think the origin. But yeah, it's the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy is very similar to that. And it's not a new idea. There's I'm Jewish, and there's an old saying in Judaism, deed before creed. So if you act like a good person, then you will start to believe, you will start to be a good person.
Oh, it's deed before believe, or
deed
creed?
before creed. So like the
Creed.
deeds
Yeah.
lead to the creed. Deeds lead to the new mental model.
Wow, there's so many correlations here. I love spirituality in many different ways, right? And I was thinking about how the definition between empathy and wisdom, what you just hit me on, was, in fact, real quick, give me what's the difference between empathy and wisdom in your judgment, in the way you see the two? What is it?
That's a good question. I would say empathy is sort of a subcategory of wisdom. So you certainly, you can be wise without empathy, but it really helps to be able to think. And yeah, to me, empathy that's another one that you have to practice. To me, is very similar to gratitude. And I think gratitude leads to empathy, because when you see, for instance, let me give you an example of how gratitude leads to empathy. So for my coffee book, I had to thank the people who got me the water, because coffee is 98.8% water. It's really just a little coffee bean dust, and then the rest is water. And I live in New York, so I went upstate where the water is, and there are hundreds, thousands of people working to get me water. And I just, the fact that I can turn a little metal knob and get clean water is just mind-blowing. It's not true. It wasn't true for 99% of history. It's still not true for billions around the world. So it made me have empathy, because it made me realize, look at these people, billions of people around the world they have to hike miles for clean water. So being aware, instead of just taking the water for granted, being aware how, I don't know if it's miraculous, it's astounding that we have clean water. And that makes me think, I'm so lucky, I want to help others.
Wow, I love this. There's so many big points here. For me, as you're talking, there's so many things I take for granted, right? And I think we all do, right? And that even could fall into complacency, right? By the way, my dad, I'm so glad you brought up the water. My dad was an engineer for the Army Corps of Engineers, and he was the district engineer in Los Angeles, which is in charge of all the flood control, the water projects, and all that kind of stuff. But afterwards, he became the chairman of the board of Metropolitan Water District. So that's all the water in Southern California. You can imagine, like in New York, right? And it's phenomenal. It's mind-blowing, like you said, when you see where that drop of water came from a raindrop and all that goes into the nature. But the canals and the mono lakes and getting the water through up and over mountains. And it is just phenomenal. And we take for granted, you turn that knob and it comes out clean, usually, right? But yeah, phenomenal.
Well, thanks to your dad. Yeah, that's a remarkable thing you did.
Yeah.
I mean, I've thought about the old cliche, is the glass half full or half empty? And I try to reframe that and say, that's not the right question. We should be amazed that there's anything in the glass at all, even if it's just 10%.
That's so true, man. That's so good. I live up here in Sun Valley, Idaho now, and the summer was a drought year. We've had a couple, there's people all over that are experiencing drought. And when you experience that, you do realize, you look down, like we have the Big Wood River right out the front door here, and it's low right now, but you know what amazes me, even though it's low, is that it keeps running. I mean, where the hell does this water come from? I mean, this is the end of summer. I understand that there's snow on the mountains and whatnot, but for it to keep running is phenomenal. And even though I understand the idea of the mountains, storing the water and then this underwater table, it just blows my mind. All I know is I look out there and there's water, running. That's not normal.
Let's hope it keeps going. Yeah.
Well, that's
for sure.
That's a different discussion. Hey, let's go back to gratitude though, real quick on your morning routine. So you email your mom every morning with one thing of gratitude. How cool is that? Give me some other. Well, first off, do you have a morning routine, and what does it look like?
I do. And actually, I'm a big fan of checklists. There was a great book that came out a couple of years ago about checklists by this doctor who talked about how checklists in the medical profession save thousands of lives because there's so much to remember. You just, don't be cocky, write it down. So I have my checklist of things I do in the morning. I write my mom, I brainstorm ideas. Even though I know 95% of them will never be used, but I just like exercising my brain. I do my push-ups. So it goes on. And for gratitude, one exercise, I don't do this every morning, but a friend of mine told me about it. It's really quite a remarkable idea, is that he just likes to remind himself that he didn't have anything to do with how he was born. He didn't choose to be born, in the United States in the 20th century. And so he tries to think, what if I was born 300 years ago as a peasant? So he spends every morning thinking, taking one other life and being like, what would my life be like if I were a farmer in the Philippines? What would my life be like if I were, an aardvark in Africa or whatever? Just to remind him that he is, he happens to live in the first world and he happens to have a pretty good life, but it is a great reminder that, I didn't do anything to deserve the fact that I got lucky enough to be born into the first world. So that I think is an interesting exercise.
Yeah, let's keep going on the exercises because there's lots of different gratitude exercises. I do a glad to be here wake up where every morning I just say, what am I grateful for? And just in my head, I don't even write it down. I mean, it's great if you want to. There's also a really cool app that I use for meditation. What the heck? Let me look it up. It's called Insight Timer. And I'm not pushing it for anything, but it has now you get to rate yourself every morning. What are you grateful for, or what kind of state are you in? So I love the idea of what you just said, of thinking back to, I could have been born in a different time frame, right?
Yeah.
What are some other exercises?
Another one I did, this is a night exercise, not a morning one, but this was a psychologist I know suggested it, and I love it. It is when you're trying to fall asleep, instead of counting sheep, count things that you're grateful for. And the way I structure it, which I think makes it challenging enough that it occupies me, but also puts me to sleep, is I do it alphabetically. So I'll start. I might start with A and B. I'm thankful that my son made apple pie over the weekend. B could be, I'm grateful that I watched a funny show called Barry the other day with Henry Winkler. So, just go through. It could be big stuff, could be your family, but it's often the small stuff that really helps because it reminds you of the small things.
I love that technique, A through Z, because I get the count your blessings. I also love, at night that I've heard it's real important to go to bed being grateful because it plants seeds in your mind as you're sleeping. And instead of just the opposite, if you're go to bed angry or upset, you're planting those seeds, right? And I think you don't even have to believe this psychologically. You just know it's true in experiences, you go to bed not feeling good, you have hard night sleeps, right? Rest. And when I go to bed and I'm feeling good and I'm grateful, typically, I have a good night's rest. So that's two great hacks, but I like the idea of A to Z because now that's going to make me think a little bit too. I like that idea. Give me one more. We've got two great exercises. You got
right.
one more?
Let me look at the list here. Well, I will say that I mentioned it before that gratitude is a two-way street.
Yep.
So I'm all for writing in your journal. That is very powerful, but actually going out of your way to thank people and look them in the eye. So for instance, when I did this coffee experiment, I asked the barista, first of all, I looked her in the eye and I said, I'm really grateful. Sometimes it's helpful to mix it up because, thank you can just come off like a reflex. But if you think about a new way to say it or think of something specific, thanks for taking the time to make the little design on top of the coffee or whatever. But when I asked her about her life, she said, yeah, the worst part is when people treat me like I'm a vending machine. They just don't even look up from their phones. They just, hold out their credit card and then go. So treating them, people like humans that they are, is not just good for them. It's also good for you because we are wired to have human contact. So that would be another little hack.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I also heard, I don't know if this is true, the number, but just observing somebody doing something good, right? Or is you actually get part of their joy. And I know that's true in this way because it's my birthday Thursday coming up, right? And
happy birthday.
Well, thank you. My wife surprised me with, she said, yeah, and I'm going from one podcast to a speaking engagement to a briefing call, a debriefing call. My days are pretty slammed, right? And she's going, look, just please block out an hour. And I'm like, okay. And usually I'm not, unfortunately, I go long on some stuff, right? So this one, she was serious. She goes, look, you need to block this out. And I was like, okay, I got it. But she wouldn't tell me what she was doing, right? And I'm thinking, well, maybe we're going to go get a massage. What is she? I have no idea what's up in her mind. And then she says, let's load our old bikes. We got to get them cleaned up. And we load the old bikes on the thing, and we take them in, and we go in the shop entrance, and we're okay. Yeah, let's fix this up, fix this. And then she goes, let's just go walk in, and while they're waiting, we have some time. Let's walk around. And we go walking into where all the new bikes are. But I'm not thinking anything. I'm really not thinking anything. And all of a sudden, there's this one bike with these wrapped, with a big bow on it and stuff. And she goes, what's that? And I'm looking at it, and I have no clue, right? This school light is still not kicked on. And I go, and I'm looking at it, I'm going, and I look and I go, well, first off, that's a pretty cool bike. That's the Specialized SL Comp, full carbon bike. I mean, again, nothing about me. I'm just going, that's a cool bike. And all of a sudden, the guy in behind the counter is bursting out laughing. And she goes, it's yours. And I was like, what? and here's the thing. I even got tearful now telling it because it was such a beautiful surprise. But what really got me was just how much she cared, the effort she went through to get the color, the really cool bike. But here's the cool part. All of a sudden, somebody just comes up and he is bursting with joy. And he goes, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe I just witnessed that. And he is full of joy. And he runs and he gets his wife and he grabs his wife. He goes, you got to come back. You got to see this. And he was so blown away that he witnessed joy, right? And I just think I tell that long story, but the joy that we can get from others just by observing, right, is I think another hack, another exercise. Go out there.
That's a great one. Yeah, I wish I were there. I feel I would have been excited. Yeah, that is lovely and lovely gesture from your wife. And by the way, it reminds me because birthdays, whenever I wish someone a happy birthday, I always say, and thanks to your mom, whether or not she's alive. But that day she was probably doing more hard work than you. It wasn't easy for you, but she was in some serious pain. So thanks to the mom on birthdays.
Yeah, I've heard this before too, and my wife does this a lot. She goes, we celebrate it backwards, right? It shouldn't be us being celebrated for our birthday. We should be celebrating our moms and our dads, the people who have cared for us, right? It makes total sense. Hey, real quick I want to go back real quickly to empathy versus compassion, because I don't think we finished on that. And it's cool. And what I want to do is I want to make sure the audience, I learned something just on a podcast yesterday that I was doing, and the difference between sympathy and empathy. And I never really thought about the difference. And here's how the person explained it to me. Well, you know what is your version? What's the difference between sympathy and empathy for you?
Well, I'm not sure I have the correct definition, but I think the way I picture it is empathy is when you actually experience some of the feelings the person has. So when you see someone who's in pain, you feel a little of their pain. Sympathy is more that you feel bad, you want to help, but it doesn't affect you on an emotional level as much.
Yeah, I think you got it. The way the person explained it to me is empathy is a feeling, right? You actually have the ability to feel someone else's, whether it's pain or sorrow or joy even too, I think. But you can feel as they feel. And that's, like you said, is a skill like gratitude. You need to practice. It can be learned. Sympathy is more of, and I know this because I did it, I've been doing it wrong for so long. Again, back to my wife, she says, you don't feel me, you don't see me sometimes, right? And I say, well, I'm sorry you're feeling bad. That's sympathy. Okay. I can say, I'm sorry you're feeling bad, but she knows I'm not feeling her pain. I've actually distanced myself from that. And someone who's empathetic, and I'm not saying that's right, that's wrong. Someone who's empathetic actually isn't just they're sorry, but they actually feel it, and then comes compassion, which is you have the wisdom to take some action. And that's how it was explained to me by actually the Dalai Lama's translator. The difference between compassion and empathy is compassion involves empathy, just what you said, right? You have to be able to feel, but then you also have the wisdom to take action, and compassion requires action. So I know you've done a lot of spiritual growth. How does that fit in with your Jewish background?
Yeah, well, I wrote a book about religion, and because I did not grow up with Judaism at all. I grew up very secular, and I still consider myself quite secular. But one interesting idea that occurred to me while you were talking is that I'm actually very involved in a group called Effective Altruism. And
I saw that. Tell me more about it.
Well, the basic idea is very non-controversial, very common sense. If we're going to do good, which I think we should, let's do it the best way we can. If we're going to give $1,000, where will that $1,000 do the most good, save the most lives, ease the most suffering? Yes. Now, what's interesting is, I talk about this with my effective altruism friends. Empathy is useful to a point, but you can get overwhelmed. Because if you spend all your time thinking about the suffering of the world, you're never going to act. You're just going to curl up in the fetal position. Exactly. So one way to counter that is instead of thinking of, almost picturing yourself as a hero. Yes. Everyone can be Oscar Schindler. Everyone can save lives. Everyone can run into a building just by cutting a check. It is remarkable how much giving to people who are in terrible circumstances or fighting malaria. You're actually saving lives. You are a hero, and that to me is more empowering and more likely to cause me to act than if I spend all of my time being like, oh my God, there's so much suffering in the world. What is going on? Everything's going to hell. So, almost visualize yourself as empowered to do these amazing things.
Wow, I love that. Well, first off, who's Oscar Schindler? I should know this, but is that Schindler's List?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
He is the German guy who saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives during World War II.
I never knew his name was Oscar. Okay, beautiful. But back to the point about, I think we all can be heroes. I like to think of, the superhero movies are really big now, right? And that's a natural thing for people. We all, I think, want to, help people and be a hero. And I like the superheroes are not necessarily, Superman or Superwoman. I just got back just 2 days ago, a good friend of mine who I came to know because he helped my family in East St. Louis, was a guy that worked 60 years for the St. Vincent de Paul. And Joe's his name, and he's an amazing individual. But the reason that he came to my mind was what you were saying, is that, he for 60 years has dealt with really tough, problems. People come to him and his shelter when they are not just out of home and money, but I'm talking, murders and drugs and really bad stuff, right? And he has this ability to not just be empathetic, because if it's just empathy, it can wear you down, but to build a shelter and do some things that make a difference. And I love that you're giving back. I know that's one of your huge things that you talk about and do. And in fact, tell me more about your process of giving and why that's important to you.
Well, I will say one of the best things to me about human nature, I do think that human nature has a lot of flaws, but one thing I love about human nature is the warm glow that has been documented scientifically, that we get a warm glow from helping others. We get this warm and fuzzy, happy feeling when we give to charity. There have been studies about that, when you help a stranger. So, you could frame it as like, oh, you're just helping because it's selfish. It makes you feel good. Who cares? Who cares what the I think it's a wonderful part of human nature, this lovely coincidence that we feel good when we do good. So so that's what I try to remind myself. It's actually someone once told me, if you're depressed, the best way to get out of it is to go and find someone else who is depressed and try to help them. Get out of your own head. So I love that.
Well, I love that analogy. And it's not just depression. It's if you want to do anything, let's say you want to grow a business, the best way to grow a business is find someone who's trying to do the same thing and help them. So, and I agree totally in the idea too, when you have depression or negative things, it's harder then. I will acknowledge that it's easy to do when things are going well. Hey, I'm going to go help somebody because I'm feeling good, but it's hard to do it when you're feeling bad. And you and I both know though, that is the way out, right? That's the path out. Hey, I love the idea of the glow. You got a glow around you right now. Okay? I'm serious.
It's like a halo.
It is a halo. You see the halo? Yeah. For people who are listening, we've AJ's got this light above it's on the ceiling, but you can't tell it's a light. It just looks like a halo. So that's pretty cool.
I should do this so it's a little less confusing.
No, we like the halo, man.
All right.
The halo looks good. Hey, let's pivot real quick to business side. You wrote an article. You've written some amazing articles, right? But the 6 most important business lessons of all time. Did I get that title right? Let me see here. 6 most important business lessons of all history, from all history. Right. Okay, I'm intrigued. Anytime you give me a title like that, I'm like, okay, man, what are they?
That is a great question, because I wrote that article so long ago, I forget most of them, but I'll remember them. I'm going to start talking and I'm going to remember them. Good. Just to give you the background, that was from my first book, which was like 20 years ago. And the premise was that I love learning. I'm very curious. So I thought, well, what if I read the entire encyclopedia from A to Z? When they used to have encyclopedias. Yeah. So I learned, I've forgotten 99.9% of it, but I did learn just an enormous ocean of information about everything in the world and everything in history. One big takeaway, I can't remember whether this was in the book, but I think it's very helpful, and I think about it all the time, is just to remind myself that the good old days were not good. They were quite often terrible. Life expectancy was 35 a few centuries ago. You had it was violent, it was sexist, it was smelly. You had carcasses lying all around New York City, and horse poop up to your waist. It was just quite just disgusting. So, anytime people are like, "Oh, the good old days, the world is going to hell," I say, you know what? That is just misplaced nostalgia. There were some good things, but I would, if I were going to be choosing a time to be, this is it. You want to be now. You do not want to be in the past. All right. So that said, I do remember one that I still think about, and it's actually a word that you brought up that reminded me. It's pivot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so some of the great companies and businesses in the past, pivoting is not just something Silicon Valley invented, but it is so important. You've got to adapt. You've got to adapt. And I remember one example that I love from history was Welch's. You know, Welch's grape juice.
Sure.
Well, Welch's did not start out as grape juice. It started out. He was a temperance advocate. He did not like alcohol, so, and he was religious. So he went on this crusade to try to get wine replaced with in communions, replaced with grape juice, and he thought that would be better. And no one seemed very excited about that. So he died, and his son took over, and he's like, this wine thing is not working out. Let's just call it grape juice and try to sell it as like this fun treat for kids. And that took off, as Welch's grape juice, huge. So always be open to evolving and changing your audience, changing your framing, because that really is one big key to success.
Well, I love the pivot. That term was big in Silicon Valley, still is, right? Let's pivot. But I think nowadays what I'm hearing more of is this idea to shift perspectives, right? And I was just actually doing a webinar about resiliency. And one of the keys to resiliency is the ability to shift perspective, right? I like to say flip it even. I like standing on my head every day. That's part of my morning routine.
Really?
Yeah, I
invert
myself.
One.
Yeah, and I learned that when I was flying jets with the Blues. It just felt good. And now I realize it's good for my body and strength. So I like this idea of shifting a perspective. And one thing I've learned is you want to shift the perspective, fly upside down in a jet. Let me tell you, the world shifts pretty quickly, right? But the idea of this, just even when you're challenged, right? Let's say there's a relationship going on or a business, something is challenging you. I think one of the keys is to shift that perspective and say, just like you were talking about, is the good old days aren't necessarily the good old days. You can shift perspective and sometimes it's like, that was hard, but also the other way around. When things are hard, you can say, okay, well, maybe there is a perspective here that I want to see. Let's say someone's late on a deliverable. Well, maybe they're actually working on something else that's going to make it even more powerful for the organization. So
there you go.
I
agree 100%. In fact, I can give you a quick example of how that worked in my life. It was, you ever hear of the artist Christo? He died a while ago, but he's the one who he would wrap buildings in these big, you remember that guy?
Well, I remember some of his works, but go for it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And one was here in New York in Central Park, he put up 10,000 orange gates with orange fabric. And it was crazy and absurd, but it was also beautiful, like when he actually did it. But it took him 25 years to do, literally 25 years.
Whoa.
Because none of the mayors wanted to do it. And, they're like, he's like, I'll pay for it myself. And they said, no, everyone's going to object. There's too many hoops but he just kept going and going. And I said, how did you have the perseverance? And he says, well, I changed my perspective. Like you say, I saw the process of going through the red tape and taking meetings with bureaucrats. I saw that as part of my art. So instead of seeing it as this horrible, annoying task, he sort of embraced it. And I loved that. And I use that in my own life. For instance, when I started as a writer 20 years ago, I would, I was like, I got into writing to write, and doing all of this publicity, doing interviews or whatever. That's just, that's a pain in my ass. I don't want to do that. So, but then I realized, it is a big part. I can either be miserable or I can change my perspective. So I changed it like Christo, and I said, you know what? This is part of my job, and I'm going to be as creative as I can in the marketing. I'm gonna make it fun. I'm gonna try to do interesting, unusual ways to market my book. So instead of seeing it as this chore, embrace it as part of the creative process.
Wow. That's a great example, because I think we all need examples, not just this idea of, well, shift perspective, because that's easy to say and sometimes challenging to do. I love that example of the art, though, and beating 25 years.
Yeah, it's a crazy story.
It makes me think about overcoming fear, right? How do you overcome paralysis and fear? And I know that when your first child came, you had some deep fear. At least that's what my research team has told me. Let's dive into some fear. How do you overcome not just paralysis, but that fear? How do you do it personally?
Well, I want to hear your tips, because you're out there. You did some really dangerous stuff. So, but for myself, is very similar to what I said earlier about behavior shapes your emotions. So acting as if you are fearless, acting as if you're courageous, and eventually you become a little more courageous. In fact, that was lots of great people have said this. Teddy Roosevelt, I remember reading a story about Teddy Roosevelt went out west, and he was having a terrible time in his life. His mother had just died. He went out west to be a cowboy, and he was a New York City kid. He did not grow up in the West. Like, he has cultivated this persona he did, but he was just like, a New York City wimp like me. And so people said, how did you do it when you're, facing the wilderness or a rampaging buffalo? And he said, oh, I just acted as if I was courageous, and eventually I became courageous. That's a paraphrase, but that was his point. So to me, that really is my secret. I still get scared, but whenever I can, I try to act as if I'm fearless. And what would a fearless person do? And actually, let me walk that back, because fearless is not a good idea. You want to have some fear. You want to be wisely fearful. Like, you don't want to, jump off a cliff and say, I'm fearless. I can, you want to assess the risks and take smart risks and not stupid risks. So I don't want to be fearless, but I want to be courageous.
Yeah, beautiful. You used the word earlier, scared, and that's how I differentiate a lot between fear and what you just said there. I'm scared all the time. I'm okay with being scared. That's awareness. It's flying upside down in those jets. Let me tell you, you're aware, right? But you're not afraid. To me, fear causes stuckness, right? And you can see it, right? You can see it in yourself. You can see it in the country right now. Heck, you can see it in the world, right? But being scared says, okay, well, like COVID, let's take, for example, let's be aware, be protective, do the smart things, but it's not going to paralyze me, right? And I heard the quote, and I'm not sure whose quote this is, but like, courage is not the absence of fear. It's the perseverance through fear, right? So another one of these things, like you're saying.
That's nice. So did you have any rituals or practices when you were doing something like flying with the angels? Did you have any?
Yeah, but any rituals or practices for what?
For overcoming fear.
Well, we had a ton of rituals and practices, and I like to speak about them in this, what I call a cadence of execution, right? So the way, like, you could say, well, what we were going to do was dangerous. And I'd flip it in my mind. Remember, we talked about flip perspective. I would say, and we would say this as a team, what we do is not dangerous, but it's inherently unforgiving, right? So this idea of saying, well, wait a minute, if we have the right processes in place and we're prepared and we train and we hire the right people and we go through the briefing. So every morning before we went flying, we would have a brief. And, you mentioned the word checklist. In fact, as I saw you looking over there once, I said, I wonder if he's reading off his checklist.
Yeah, no, I did. I have it right here.
Yeah. And so we had checklists in the jets, right? But also we had a process of focusing our mind before we went flying. And I think that's the most important part I can give you right now. And that is that we went through this process of visualization, this process of blocking out distractions, focusing down on what's important. I would fly the entire flight in my mind, visualizing it through the voice calls of the boss. And we would do this as a group, by the way, not just as an individual. This is what's really mind-blowing, is we did it as a group visualization. And what that did is that prepared you well before. Then you have to go out there and execute. And of course, you have to adapt as you're executing because things change. So you're constantly adapting. And here's the secret sauce. And that is you got to debrief afterwards. If you don't do the debrief and you just go, oh, that was great. Or even if it was bad, and you just move on, you're not capturing the learnings that you want to replicate or changing what you don't want to do, right? So the debrief, same thing, we'd get together in the room and we would go through a very interesting sequence process. They went well beyond the concept. And this is where the glad to be here and gratitude goes full circle. And that is, yes, of course, we'd look at each maneuver and we'd say, where you're high, where you're low, how did we get there? What were the decisions that were made for that? But what we found in that process of self-assessing first, looking inward first, before anybody else pointed it out to you, the we is greater than the I. So we want to get better as a group, as a team. In that process, we built camaraderie, we built chemistry, we built leadership, we built teamwork, and we got better, but we also had more fun. And that was the gratefulness piece, to say, I'm part of something special. I'm part of something larger than myself. And we reminded ourselves that every single day, AJ, this gratitude every single day.
That's great. That is great. And I love the visualization part. I was just thinking to myself while you said that, I got to remember to do more visualization because it really is powerful.
It is. Hey, I got a couple quick questions that I want to wrap in gratitude. But the quick question is, so you read the whole Encyclopedia Britannica. I mean, I remember being a kid and an encyclopedia salesman came by and it was the first time I ever really met a salesperson, because at first my mom and dad, they weren't really going for it, and I got to tell you, because I was just observing, and he said, oh, bring the kids in, we sat down and I'm thinking, who is this guy? Why am I sitting here? And I mean, by the end of his spiel, I wanted it, right? And so therefore, my parents bought it, but I didn't read them. I didn't do what you did. I bought it and didn't read them. So what was your takeaway after reading the entire Encyclopedia Britannica? What were your biggest takeaways?
One was the one I mentioned before, that the good old days were not good. Yep. Another one is the world is big. The world is, there is so much knowledge out there, and no one can ever wrap their minds around it. They're just things that would just blow my mind. For instance, there's something in China I read about in the tea section called the Taiping Rebellion. I'd sort of heard of it, maybe. But when I read it, I was just astounded, because this was at the same time as our United States Civil War, which was horrible and bloody. And I think 700, 800,000 people died in our Civil War. Taiping Rebellion, about the same time period, 20 million people died. That's crazy. And we never hear about it. And it was also a bizarre story. It was like a cult leader who thought he was God, and he had a harem of hundreds of women, and they just went on rampage. But actually, it was put down by General Tso. You ever have General Tso's chicken?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's
So
funny you say so, but that's spelled Tao, right? General Tao.
TSO, I think it's spelled. I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, General Tso.
How's it spelled? How's it spelled? Do you remember?
I thought it was TSO.
TSO. Okay, got it. Yeah, no, that was it. To me, it's the T though. The T silent.
Yeah, the T. Yeah, the silent T.
Okay.
But anyway, it was just, and there were thousands of things like that, just to remind me the world is huge, history is huge. And I personally find that inspiring and awesome. And there's always more to learn. And curiosity to me is, along with gratitude, curiosity and gratitude are two of my favorite virtues.
Whoa, I love that. You know, I had an experience of I didn't read the Encyclopedia Britannica, but I was at Stanford and I'd done a couple of masters. I was actually working on my third master's degree and I had some extra credits. So I started to do art and music. And all of a sudden, because you know, the thing that's cool is that the world is opened up. There's so many amazing people. I wanted to study economics. I wanted to study leadership. I wanted to study, you know, negotiation. I wanted to study medicine. I wanted to study art and music. And all of a sudden I realized the more I studied, the less I really knew, you know, and it just, the awareness was, wow, this is a cool world we lived in. And there's so many people that are so gifted, so much knowledge out there. Hey, you know, one of the things I want to wrap into is you wrote a book. And the title there is this awesome. I want to dive into this real quick. Drop Dead Healthy. Okay. The perfection, one man's humble quest for body perfection. Okay, man, let's just riff on that real quick. What is drop dead perfection unhealthy?
Yeah, well, this was sort of I was in terrible shape and I decided I'm going to try to get healthier. I never became the healthiest person alive, and you're probably healthier than me, but I did learn a lot. I tried everything. I tried all the diets, all the exercise regimens. I changed the way I slept and how I changed the way I went to the bathroom. You know, I won't get into it unless you want, but you know,
no, that's a good intrigue. Well, okay, tell me, you know, because I want some facts. I mean, everybody says, you know, you can hear all this stuff, how to be healthy, but I've never heard change the way you go to the bathroom. So what did you change?
Well, you know, we were built to, as humans, to squat in the fields. We were not built to sit on a comfortable throne. So, you know,
really,
the squatting it's faster, and it is, you know, it causes fewer hemorrhoids. So if you really want to be healthy, yeah. I mean, I don't. When I was doing
what'd you do? You take the toilets out of what'd you do?
Well, there is something you can buy on the internet that basically turns your first world toilet into a developing nation toilet. So it's like you put it over and it's got a little hole in it and you can squat. And my wife made me get rid of that after 2 days. But you know, you probably heard of the squatty potty or these, you know, just the little stools.
Yeah, but no, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been in Asia though. I've been in third world countries where you had to use, you know, it's just a hole, right? And so that's just what you're doing. But I didn't know that was healthier. That's kind of
it is healthy. And you don't need to do it that much. Just, you know, to make it a little more. Just put, you know, put a couple of encyclopedias under your feet, or put a little stool, no pun intended, under your feet, and that is healthier. So. But yeah,
that's definitely out in left field. Give me some more. What else did you learn from that book or those experiments? The guinea pig.
Yeah. Well, so much. I mean, one is just the idea that you know, they're not a lot of huge secrets that people are keeping from you about being healthy. We know what makes you healthy, which is get a good amount of exercise, keep moving, eat real foods, not like, you know, cut down on sugar, don't smoke. So the key is
I just want to show you something. Look at my lunch.
Oh, nice. Look at that. You are
lettuce. So people who can't see it, it's salad, but it's lettuce. And these are carrots.
Oh, interesting.
From our garden. Yeah.
Wow.
You believe that's a carrot? I mean, look at the different shapes. So it's crazy. These are real, like you said, this is real organically food grown with love.
That is cool. Well, so what I was saying was, you know, we know what makes you healthy, but why do we keep acting in unhealthy ways? That's the mystery. And part of the solution is to set up your environment so that you don't have a choice. Because you know, willpower is tough. Willpower is, you can't rely on willpower all the time. So, put the cookies high up on the shelf so you never see them.
Don't even have them in the shelf. You're right. You got to
there
get
you
rid of
go. Yeah, if you can get rid of them, even better. Or just develop rules of thumb, like instead of going to the pantry, go to the fridge, because the fridge has better food, because good real food spoils. And yeah, and food that is sort of artificial can stay stable for a long time. So go to the fridge, not the pantry. So simple rules like that on how to act. You don't have to memorize, I think, all of the supplements that you need to take. You can, but simple rules on making yourself act healthy is a very important strategy.
Okay, brother. Listen, this has been fun. I want to wrap with two questions. One is, I want to know any kind of life lessons, any mantras, any quotes that you've come by and now you live your life by that you want to share with the audience here. Give me one or two.
Sure. Well, I've mentioned a few. So there's the good old days were not good. What about if I just want to circle back to the glass is not half full or half empty. Don't even focus on that. Focus on the fact that it's miraculous. It's amazing that we have water in there at all. So yeah, that would be my, I think the one that I try to live by is be grateful for every little thing. Like sometimes I'll press the elevator button and I'll be grateful the elevator came, and I'll get in the elevator and be grateful it didn't plummet to the basement and break my collarbone. And, there's hundreds, once you start to notice, hundreds of little things that we can be grateful for.
Awesome. I love that. Be grateful for little things. Well, that's how we end. I always end with a glad to be here statement. So I'll start and then you can take us home. I'm super grateful just to have this time with you. This has been a precious hour. Really learned a lot. I'm joyful on some of the tips you've given me and us. But the one that's just sticking in my head is squatting. I don't know why. I mean, of all the great knowledge that you gave us, that squatting picture is visualized in my brain. And so I'm going to try to keep some of your other wisdom there. But thanks, AJ. This has been a blessing. I'm glad you were here. Glad to be here.
I am so glad that I was here too. I'm very honored that the squatting thing resonated. And I'm grateful that, because I like when I go on podcasts, I like it when it's a two-way conversation and I learn, and that's exactly what happened. So thank you for your wisdom, and I loved learning about the visualizations for your Blue Angel flights. So thank you. I'm glad to be here for that.
Awesome, AJ. Hey, I know you have a huge following on lots of different platforms. How can people follow you that listen to this? How's the best way that they should get a hold of you?
Whatever their preference is. My website is ajjacobs.com. Twitter is @ajjacobs, and Facebook is @ajjacobs. So however you want to reach me, I'd be glad to hear from you.
All right. AJ, it's been awesome. A lot of great takeaways in this one. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Thank you, John.